attempting to make a giant stained glass painting featuring Cinnamoroll. So recently, I've been obsessed with a technique called glass painting. It's honestly one of the most aesthetic crafts that I've ever seen. And ever since I got this jigsaw puzzle, I wanted to try DIYing the stained glass effect myself. The problem is, this is my first time painting on glass, so this could turn out great or be a complete disaster. We will see. So first off, I sketched out a design on my iPad, and I wanted to incorporate both the anime glass painting technique and a stained glass effect, and those are actually not the same thing. For anime glass paintings, the main character is opaque, but the backdrop is totally clear. So I'm gonna do that for Cinnamoroll and the sky. Whereas the stained glass effect is tinted, but still lets light shine through. So I'm gonna do that for the border, the clouds, and the extra little guys. So here's the completed design, and I'm actually super happy with how it looks. So the next step is to try to get this onto the glass. So I mirrored and scaled up the image, printed out a giant version of the design and taped it together, and I was ready to start tracing. Or so I thought. Alright, well, we have a slight problem. I was literally just trying to put the glass on the table, and it freaking shattered on me. So, yeah. Anyhow, the only thing to do was clean up the glass and go back to the drawing board. And by drawing board, I mean Amazon. I have decided that instead of doing a stained glass painting, I'm gonna do a stained acrylic painting instead, because glass is hazardous, expensive, and did I mention hazardous? So I placed an Amazon order, and after a few days of waiting... Okay, so today my acrylic sheet came in, and it's about as clear as the glass, but man, is it flimsy. I mean, on the bright side, that means that it probably isn't gonna shatter, so you know, pros and cons. And with my new acrylic sheet successfully placed on the table without shattering, I was ready to start transferring over the design. Alright, here goes! Okay, literally nothing is happening. Maybe I should read the instructions. So it turns out when you get a new oil-based Sharpie, you actually have to press it down a bunch first to get the ink flowing onto the nib. Alright, take two, let's do this. Ah, my hand is so unsteady. Also, this Sharpie line is a lot thinner than the lines that I printed. I guess that's what happens when you use a fine-pointed Sharpie on an extremely large-size painting, Stella. But luckily, getting a Sharpie that's too thin is much easier to fix than a Sharpie that's too thick, because ultimately it just means that I had to trace over each line multiple times. And with some practice, I was getting quite used to drawing on the acrylic. But then, oh no! While I was shaking the pen to get more ink, it accidentally splattered onto the canvas. Ah! Okay, so based on some of the YouTube videos that I watched, I think you can actually use nail polish remover as an eraser. And at first I thought it was working great, so I continued transferring over more lines, but... Okay, so here's the thing. Some of the places where I erased kind of have like a smudgy effect. I gotta say, the perfectionist in me is kind of bothered by it. Like, I really want this piece to look as good as possible, you know? And the good news is my Amazon order actually came with 5 acrylic sheets. So what I'm thinking is I'm actually gonna scrap this attempt and start over on a different sheet, but I'll use this old one as like a way to practice my techniques before I commit. So the first practice test I wanted to try was fixing my line art technique, because one thing I noticed was that the oil-based Sharpie marker wasn't totally opaque. And I was wondering if a regular Sharpie marker might work better. And well, turns out the answer is no, lol. I guess there's a reason why all the YouTube videos recommended an oil-based marker. The second test was fixing my erasing technique. I suspect that the extra ingredients which make nail polish remover great for your nails also make it great at leaving smudges on my acrylic. So I made a quick trip to Target to pick up some plain old rubbing alcohol instead. Honestly, I do not know why I didn't already own alcohol or Q-tips, but hey, I have them now. Alright, here goes. Oh my gosh, wait, that actually works so well! And with all my experimentation completed, I got out a new acrylic sheet, and it was time for round 3. The third time was really the charm for me because this time things went a lot more smoothly. I suppose having some time to practice instead of going in totally blind was kinda helpful. It still did take me quite a while to transfer over all the lines because I wanted them to look as good as possible, so I erased and retraced a ton. And after approximately more hours than I would like to admit, I finally finished tracing. I will say it's certainly not perfect. Like if you zoom in, you can see that some of my lines are kinda messy, but honestly, overall, I am feeling pretty happy with how it looks. Alright, and today we finally get to start painting. And I'm thinking I'm gonna start with Cinnamoroll's eyes because honestly, it's been looking a little bit cursed without them. So I got a giant set of acrylic paints off of Amazon, and honestly, this color looks pretty close to the Cinnamoroll eyes that I'm looking for. But if I've learned anything, it's that sometimes things do not show up as you expect when you paint on glass/acrylic. So I'm gonna test it out and see how a bunch of like different colors look after you actually paint it on and let it dry. First off, I wanted to test 2 different ways of applying the paint. One where I used like a super thick glob, and one where I used a more more thin layer. I also wanted to see whether the base color straight from the bottle would be good enough, or if I wanted to lighten it a bit. But I realized that I probably didn't add enough white to my mixture because I could barely see a difference between my swatches, so I also tried a third version where I added a ton of white paint. And I'm really glad that I tested a super light version because that one ended up being my favorite since they all got a bit darker as they dried on the acrylic. So the paint swatches have dried, and I gotta say, neither of them are looking like they're quite it. Like, the thick ones are a little bit splotchy, but the thin ones are very clearly streaky. So I guess what I'm hoping is that if I add a few more layers to the thin painting technique, I'll be able to get it to look even. We'll see. And thankfully, after I added quite a few layers on top, I was able to get rid of the streaks and got a nice, smooth, and satisfying finish. And for the last test, I'm going to test erasing with the alcohol because, let's be real, I'm probably gonna make some mistakes. Alright, well, it looks like it erases kind of slowly, but it does. And I actually think the slow erasing was a good thing because it gives you a little more control over fine details. And with that, I finished my tests and it was time to graduate onto the real piece. So for glass painting, the front of the piece is actually the side that you aren't painting on, so you want to start with the little details and then layer the larger colors on top afterwards. But as a result, it's super important to make sure that the shapes you put in now are precise, because once you add another layer on top, you won't be able to make any changes to the previous ones. And because of that, I was quite fixated on making sure that I didn't make any mistakes. I spent a bunch of time making sure that Cinnamoroll's eyes and cheeks were the ideal shapes for maximum cuteness, and I added approximately way too many layers of paint to each of them to make sure they were completely smooth and opaque. Okay guys, I'm conflicted because on one hand, this painting is looking so freaking cute, but on the other hand, it is literally taking me forever. Like, it's already nighttime again, and I have barely made any progress. I painted like 4 little dots and 1 little line in an entire day. Like, in my head, I thought this was gonna be a quick and easy project, but in retrospect, starting my first glass painting with a giant version may have been not the best move. And to be clear, being detail-oriented in itself isn't a bad thing, but once I realized I was starting to feel really sad about my lack of progress, that's when I realized I had probably crossed the line from dedication to over-obsession. Alright, and with that, I think I'm gonna call it a day. I know it doesn't really look like I made that much progress, but I literally spent all day painting like so many layers. I'm not sure if the paint that I'm using is just like not that great or something, but I really wanted to make sure that these areas were opaque. Alright, next up, it's time to fill in Cinnamoroll's body. So before I start painting, I'm just gonna use a Q-tip to like really clean up all the inside and make sure there are no smudges. But while I was cleaning, I found something quite unfortunate. Guys, at some point, I got a scratch on Cinnamoroll's body, and it's kind of deep too. And as much as it bothers the perfectionist in me, I also feel like I spent way too long on this piece to just like completely scrap it and start afresh, you know what I mean? So I feel like at this point I just have to accept that my Cinnamoroll is gonna be flawed, but I just gotta keep moving forward, you know? At first, I was feeling pretty bummed out. I spent so long trying to make the piece look perfect, like I even scrapped my first attempt at the line art, only for the scratch to kind of take that away from me without me even noticing when it happened. But as I painted more layers, it started to feel kind of freeing. Yes, I was still trying my best to make the body of Cinnamoroll look smooth and even, and make sure I got all the gaps in the paint. But I think something inside me was like, well, if it's not perfect, that's okay. You may as well just try your best and get it done. Alright, and with that, my Cinnamoroll is now complete, and I'm ready to move on to the stained glass effect. Honestly, I'm glad I persevered because you can barely even see like the scratch on the Cinnamoroll. It's kind of like if I didn't tell you, you probably wouldn't even notice. Okay, so today I'm gonna try to make the translucent stained glass effect, and in order to do that, I actually bought another type of paint from Amazon. This is a clear gloss paint, so hopefully if I mix it together with the acrylic paints, it'll like create a translucent effect. So I tried it, and I found that if I mixed together a lot of the clear gloss paint with a little itty bit of acrylic paint, it created a somewhat translucent effect, which is exactly what I was going for. And with that, I was ready to start painting on the real thing. I started off with filling in the little confettis in the sky, and while I was doing so, I realized that unlike the acrylic paint which went on top of the black lines that I drew, the clear gloss paint kinda actually smudged the lines from my paint pen. But I realized that ultimately the smudges were pretty small and really not that big of a deal. Like, if you aren't looking super closely, it's hard to even tell. So I just continued onward, trying my best to avoid smudging if possible, but not stressing about it too much if it did. Then I went ahead and started filling in the clouds with a mixture of the gloss paint and white paint. And while I was painting, I realized that in order to really blend the paints together to get an even translucent mixture, I needed significantly more gloss paint than the amount that I paid for, so my clouds ended up having a bit of a marbly effect per se. And with that, I finished painting all the center of my canvas. I will admit that in my head, I was expecting for the stained glass parts to have a bit more of a smooth, translucent finish, but just because something isn't the same as what you imagined does not mean that it's bad per se, right? Like it's a cloudy finish for the clouds or something. Anyhow, while I was working on the clouds, I completely ran out of the clear gloss paint though, so for the outermost border, I think I'm gonna have to pivot and just use my good old acrylic paint because I still have more than plenty of it left. And with that, I was on to the final stretch of my Cinnamoroll painting. By this point, I was feeling pretty comfortable with painting on glass. I knew exactly how many layers I need to make the paint look smooth and the right techniques for applying it. And the funny thing is, I actually think I'm glad that I ran out of the translucent paint because I feel like the piece looked better with opaque borders than it would have with translucent ones. Like sometimes when things don't go as you expect, it could end up with an even better result. And now, it is time for the grand reveal! Ta-da! One giant Cinnamoroll glass painting completed. Honestly, I'm really happy with how it turned out. Like, even though a lot of things did not go according to plan, I feel like at the end of the day, it's a really freaking cute giant Cinnamoroll stained glass painting, you know? And I know this is gonna sound cheesy, but some of the imperfections that I was getting like really stressed out about, I feel like ultimately just give the piece character, right? Like it'll remind me that, hey, you know, Stella, you made this yourself. That's something to be proud of. And I'm really glad that I did because even though the craft took way longer than I expected, I really enjoyed the process and I learned a lot as well. Anyhow, if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. And let me know if you have any other crafty ideas I should try. Hope to see you next time. Bye!